Maybe this is the superhero fatigue in me talking, and maybe I'm just relieved to watch a blockbuster movie that doesn't revolve around comic book characters. But much to my surprise, Transformers Rise of the Beasts was much more entertaining than it had any reason to be. I know, I'm just as shocked as you are. Let's discuss.
I watch so you don't have to.
Before I get started, I'd like to kindly ask that you hit the like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.
Come on. Do it! Do it!
Optimus Prime and the Autobots take their biggest challenge yet. When a new threat capable of destroying the entire planet emerges, they must team up with a powerful faction of Transformers known as the Maximals to save Earth. Full disclosure, I haven't seen a Transformers movie since Revenge of the Fallen, which was the second movie in the franchise for those keeping count. I remember I enjoyed the original movie in 2007, and I was relatively excited for the sequel. But I remember walking out of Revenge of the Fallen feeling like I just watched one of the worst movies ever made. And I've tried to rewatch it since then, and I still feel the same exact way. So I pretty much wrote off this franchise, assuming that all of the later sequels were going to be more of the same.
That is one big pile of shit.
I did hear decent things about the Bumblebee movie just a couple of years ago, and this movie is supposedly a direct sequel to that. But take it from me, someone who has been completely disconnected from this franchise in every way, you don't have to have seen any of the other movies to enjoy this one. It should also be noted before I get into my thoughts that I am in no way a big Transformers fan. I have a passing knowledge of the subject at best, and it's just not something I grew up with.
How can you not care?
Like this.
So this review isn't coming from a die-hard fan's perspective, it's coming from a Transformers casual. I did watch Beast Wars in the early 90s because that was my generation's incarnation of the Transformers lore. So I'm not going to lie, I had a bit of nostalgia kick in when I heard that the Maximals were going to be in this movie. But it's been so long since I've seen Beast Wars, and again, I have very little knowledge of Transformers to begin with, so I in no way can speak to this movie's accuracy to the source material.
You understand? I'm in the dark!
But from a pure entertainment value standpoint, to me, this is exactly what you want from a summer blockbuster. It very much felt like a late 90s, early 2000s throwback in this genre. It gives you exactly what you need from a movie like this, and even offers some surprises along the way.
Get the f*** out of here!
No, I cannot, it's serious!
Now, is this movie a game changer? No, it's not. Is it a masterpiece of cinema? Hell no, it's not. But I do think that it's a crowd pleaser in every sense of the word. A lot of times the human characters take away from movies like this. They either dominate the runtime, which takes away from the reason people show up to watch these movies to begin with, the robots, or they are just so bland and forgettable that they might as well have not even been in the movie to begin with.
Why are you the way that you are?
But I found the human lead in this movie, played by Anthony Ramos, to be neither of those things. In fact, I found him to be quite likable and relatable. Now, you could say that his character is a cliche, but as I always say, cliches are okay if they are done right. If they at least try to put a somewhat fresh spin on them. You can have a predictable, down-on-his-luck character that stumbles upon this war going on around him that he had no idea about. And you can do that without making him boring.
Put some effort into it!
His female counterpart wasn't quite as memorable, and she felt more like a vessel for plot convenience than anything. As for the robots, I'm just going to keep it real with you. It will never not be cool to see and hear Optimus Prime on the big screen. He's just such a cool character, and he is voiced by the legendary Peter Cullen once again. And unlike a lot of modern movies, this iconic character is treated with respect, which is refreshing.
Jesus Christ, it's about time!
One kind of pleasant surprise for me was Mirage, who kind of takes Bumblebee's place as our window into this world this time around. He's the Transformer who is now interacting most with the human lead. And it's clear to me that he's also intended to be the comic relief of this movie, which would normally be unappealing to someone like me. But much to my surprise, his comedic moments weren't as cringe-inducing as, say, something you would see in an MCU movie.
Haven't you ever heard of the healing power of laughter?
He is voiced by Pete Davidson, which I didn't know while watching it. A person that I do personally find to be obnoxious in real life, but not knowing that while watching it, I did find Mirage to be somewhat charming. And to me, they didn't overdo it with the comedic side of his character. The comedy didn't feel as forced as it does in some other movies. The jokes felt appropriate for the times and situations that they were placed in.
I'm having trouble.
It was awesome to see the Maximals, but if I'm being honest, they were kind of underutilized. I don't think that Rhinox and Cheetor had more than a couple of lines between them throughout the entire course of the movie. And that could be because they're saving them for later entries in the series, but this wasn't the most flattering introduction for them. The villains of this movie are also pretty one-dimensional, but they do make the de facto leader Scourge feel like somewhat of a big deal through his actions.
It was purely and simply evil.
The plot of this movie is pretty standard, as expected. It basically comes down to we have to find this thing before the bad guys do, otherwise the world is going to end. We've seen this before 1,000 times. But on the way to that inevitable conflict and resolution, this movie is very fast-paced and action-packed. Not once while watching it, even though I kind of knew where it was going, did I feel bored. Like I said, I was relatively entertained from start to finish.
That makes sense.
There is some cheesiness to this movie, which again, if done right, can be acceptable. You know those moments where a character gets a pep talk, and then he says something kind of corny, and then he has his redemption moment. The difference is, I think, this movie feels very much more self-aware about it. And it makes it very clear that it's not trying to be anything other than what it is. I really appreciated the simplistic nature of that and how it was executed.
I like it a lot.
Also, on a personal note, I very much enjoyed the song choices for this film. The story takes place in the early 90s, so it has a very early 90s New York hip-hop inspired soundtrack, and it just creates such a nice vibe throughout the movie if you're into that sort of thing. There's also this needle drop moment towards the end of the film where an iconic hip-hop song is played, and it coincides with a substantial moment in the movie, and it was a lot of fun when it happened.
Yo, watch this. This is that shit right here. This is that shit.
I gotta say, I kinda like the fact that this franchise feels a bit less grand and extravagant than the last time I watched it. It very much feels like they've taken a back-to-basics approach. And it would be weird to say grounded approach for a movie like this, but I'll just say that it's focused on what it needs to be and it's not trying to do too much. Overall, Transformers: Rise of the Beasts is not a perfect movie by any means. It's not even a great movie. But it is a good movie that serves a purpose, and that purpose is to entertain people. It's not preaching to you, it's not treating the audience like you're a bunch of idiots. There are things in it that don't make sense, but because you're so entertained, it ultimately doesn't really matter. I have to say, I'm a little surprised that this movie is getting blasted by critics so harshly, considering it does a lot of things that critics tend to praise in other movies. And in my opinion, it does a lot of those things better. I went into this movie with no expectations, and maybe my time away from this franchise allowed me to enjoy this entry a bit more. But I have to admit, I was pleased overall, and that's why I'm going to give Transformers: Rise of the Beasts the pleased Palpatine.
Good.
Y'all be cool. Right on.